Why is accepting this script such an ordeal?
Well, I don't think it translates that well, culturally speaking.
Then why don't we try changing things up just a bit?
What are you suggesting we do?
Nothing too extreme. I mean, I think at the very least we should make it more fun.
Well, it's been almost 4 years, so let's get right into it. Before we start, remember to like and subscribe for more insight into the anime dubbing industry. Or if you want, you could also support us on Patreon. Trust me, this time we're gonna need all the support we can get.
But the fact is, you've been making us all look bad. I'm sorry, sir?
It's interesting to track the legacy and impact that certain anime dubs will end up having on the community years later. I don't think the people who made dubs like Cowboy Bebop, Black Lagoon, Fooly Cooly, or even Yu Yu Hakusho were aware that at the time, they were creating gold standards for fans and industry folk alike. Nor do I think the 4Kids writers were aware that they were making memes that would still be quoted to this day. Not all legacies are positive, and in that same vein, I don't think the dub team behind Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid were expecting the show's English version would greatly affect a lot of people's experiences with the industry years later. With the growing popularity of simulcasts, it's much easier and quicker to compare differences or deviations between a dubbed and subtitled version. Mistakes, errors, and obtuse script deviations stand out and get scrutinized by a lot more people and sooner than they likely would have in the past.
That depends on what finger I use. Well,
but that could be a good thing. The current state of the industry does have a lot to be desired, but maybe it would have been even worse off without some form of pressure for it to improve.
You are certainly on the ball today, Captain Ginyu. If you were a dog, I'd scratch your belly. If you were a cat, I'd give you warm milk until you started to purr. Outstanding, Captain Ginyu. Simply outstanding. Once again, you have exceeded my expectations, but you did it with such apparent ease that I'm upset with myself for not having called your men in sooner.
Had it not been for that, there's a chance that things like heavily edited, child-friendly dubs would still rule the roost.
do a doodle cock!
However, due to steps forward like this, arguably now there's more of an expectation to get things right the first time. It makes sense that there's eventually going to be mistakes, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't hope for the best.
Not according to the internet.
Okay, so the stage is set, enough beating around the bush. If you've seen this image online before or others like it, you probably already know what we're going to be talking about today. At best, some fans see rewrites like this in the Maid Dragon dub as examples of oversights that should have always been corrected no matter the context. And at worst, they see those moments as another de facto reason why dubbing shouldn't be bothered with in the first place. The attention this received got us interested in how reflective those scenes were of how the rest of the show got dubbed. Was there anything all these noticeable moments had in common? And were there any other scenes that illustrate a similar issue that just didn't get the same coverage online? How about we start with the elephant in the room and work our way back from there? Oh, and don't worry, I definitely don't intend to throw the usual
"Some may say it's a good change, others may say it's a bad change"
at every example we bring up in this video. So for those who don't know, the show is mostly about dragons coming to our world and the hijinks that ensue from them not understanding social norms.
何ですかその格好。
いつも言われるから露出度を抑えたんだ。どうかな？
次は体を変えるといいですよ。
Lukua, for example, is a soft-spoken, ara-ara type of character, who isn't always aware of how lewd others find her despite her best efforts to be nice. And that's what this line in episode 12 feels like, Lukua taking other people's feelings into consideration, while the dubbed version of this scene is a little bit more aggressive.
What are you wearing that for?
Oh, those pesky patriarchal societal demands were getting on my nerves, so I changed clothes.
Give it a week, they'll be begging you to change back.
Huh?
This take makes it seem like Lukua covered up because she felt pressured to, rather than because she wanted to. And the gentle tone she says it with almost makes it sound sarcastic. Which is not how Lukua is presented at all in the Japanese version. The dragons in general are meant to be out of touch, so this line kind of flies in the face of one of the show's main conceits. Maybe some people who hadn't seen the subbed version could have found the joke funny on its own, but even then, patriarchal societal demands is a very charged phrase. It's not something particularly lighthearted or casual, so it jumps right out at you, and in our opinion, for the wrong reason. The line was delivered and presumably written by Jamie Markey, the scriptwriter for this whole dub. As we'll get to later, a line can change at multiple points in the dubbing pipeline before an episode is finalized. However, there's another dub line that we definitely can attribute to Jamie.
It's you! I love you, Miss Kobayashi!
You gonna eat me?
No, not like that, like sexually!
I'm not into women or dragons.
This here is another example of taking a pretty ordinary line and making it more of a direct joke or one-liner. But unlike the patriarchy example, I didn't even notice that this line had such different implications until others pointed it out to me, arguably having a domino effect on the rest of the dub.
トールは小林さんが大好きです。
食べる気？
違います、性的にです。
私は女なんだが。
In Yuri stories, a phrase like, "but I'm a woman," or "but we're both girls," is something of a genre trope. One of the female leads will say it near the start only for her to ironically end up falling in love with a woman later on. And as mentioned, Jamie did take credit for the line and tried explaining her reasoning, with one of them being that she didn't want the implication to be that Kobayashi thought there was something wrong with a woman being sexually attracted to another woman, while also filling the lip flaps. And honestly, I can see where she's coming from. Well, to a point. Kobayashi's response is meant to be a rejection of Toru's feelings, but responding to advances from someone by passively stating that they just happen to be the same sex does feel like a bit of an affirmation that that's inherently weird or unnatural. It's not an explicit no, but it is dismissive in a potentially hurtful way. Even the official manga translation, which came out just before the anime aired, has Kobayashi say that's not good either, with regards to whether Toru wants to eat Kobayashi or have sex with her. From what we understand, Japan has, generally speaking, been more conservative when it comes to the public view of LGBT+ couples. That isn't to say everything is set in stone though, and things could change, hopefully for the better. But what would that mean for genre tropes like this that were first conceived in the past? We've come across the dubs for some LGBT+ friendly shows, and a few of them also avoided explicitly saying, "but we're both girls." But at the very least, the new lines they came up with didn't result in the protagonist of a Yuri series flat out saying they weren't into women. I'm not saying the manga translation or these other dubs were more, quote, correctly adapted compared to the Dragon Maid dub. They could all be inferior to various extents. Rephrasing a potentially hurtful line could make the trope less distracting to foreign viewers who don't know much about Yuri, but it will be at the detriment of hardcore fans who are used to this cliché. I do think there's a discussion to be had regarding how these rewritten lines could be seen in the future compared to now, or how LGBT+ people feel about their sexuality being seen as weird in these stories, etc., etc. At the end of the day, Kobayashi lives in a society, and if that society gave her some not-so-great presumptions, that still doesn't make her a bad person. Part of the show is that while the dragons make a mess of things due to not understanding societal norms, Kobayashi understands the norms so well that she's jaded. Though for now, let's just say, it's one thing to not literally translate the trope, but to potentially present a Yuri protagonist as definitively straight, within the first 10 minutes of the very first episode, it seems like an obvious or even disrespectful oversight that could be pretty hard to recover from. And for some people, that bad first impression can extend to other English dubs, or at the very least the ones from Funimation, especially since this issue wasn't changed or corrected for the home video release. Personally, I do have friends who feel that way to this day, and honestly, I couldn't blame them for having such a reaction, as it might also inadvertently infer the actions of other characters in a not-so-appealing light. I've seen it argued that Toru's romantic advances were charming in the subbed version because they could be seen as relationship building between characters who could reciprocate each other's feelings. Now, Cool Kyo Shinja, the original creator of Dragon Maid, is not strictly a Yuri author themselves, but one interpretation of the last episode is that it's a parallel to a same-sex couple coming out to a more close-minded family member. And if the "I'm not into women or dragons" line takes away the romantic angle, these same untouched scenes have a less charming subtext. Granted, in episode 12, the dub contains a line that could be seen as a correction to this issue.
Yes, rude dragon!
I'm sorry.
Fondle your tits! It's okay to be curious even though society pressures me to say that I'm not!
Like a lot of other things, I don't really know how deliberate this edition was, or what it even accomplishes, if anything. But the line itself is so awkwardly jammed in that it takes you out of the experience regardless.
陰謀ですね。
Now, Jamie could very easily go on Twitter tomorrow and say she intentionally wants to make gay anime less gay, thus rendering this whole thing moot. I mean, provided she isn't telling obvious jokes. However, she also wrote the script for and had a main role in the dub for Yurikuma Arashi, probably one of the most openly Yuri shows to have aired around that time.
Yuri!
And while that dub definitely suffers in other departments, one thing that the script doesn't do is try to cover up the very explicit affections between people of the same sex. which maybe makes this situation even more confusing.
You really love her, don't you, sweetie?
Yeah, I do.
Trust me, this video could be a lot shorter if I said these line changes were the result of Jamie and FUNimation trying too hard to push some kind of agenda. I understand that there are going to be those who feel adamant about this no matter what other potential explanations we bring up, but based on the rest of this dub, I more so reckon these lines were consequences of what happens when you aren't careful when you punch up a script, or when it's done in a way that doesn't really play into the character archetypes that you're trying to adapt. Because trust me, these are far from the two only examples of that in this dub. Now, we've used this term in the past, and punching up has a different definition when talking about comedy, but what we're talking about is in the context of script writing. In general, it refers to adding personality or subtext to what would otherwise be sterile on-the-nose dialogue. This might be done with slang, inside jokes, filler words, less formal language, specific turns of phrase, and yes, making passive dialogue sound more slick and direct. All of these can be a way to naturally reveal things about a character without specifically saying what that character is about. But you also have to make sure it's revealing the right things. There's no single way to do this so long as it serves the main goal for a writer to create a connection with their audience. However, there's a difference between punching up dialogue in your own screenplays versus dialogue in an adaptation for someone else's story.
Please, you have to help us! It's awful! Our village is being attacked by a lot of gunmen! Please help! We are just defenseless girls! Oh! The gunmen are almost upon us! Ah!
Remember, for dubs, it's not just about sounding natural. It's about sounding natural while syncing to the lip flaps, and maintaining the spirit of the Japanese dialogue. Sometimes the script supervisor, actors, or ADR directors will try to generate that aforementioned intimacy with a new audience. For example, you can use slang, contractions, or other vernacular to make it seem like a character is just naturally running their mouth, instead of reading a script that was pre-written and pre-timed by someone else.
This sucks! This really fucking sucks! Why am I stuck playing fucking errand boy with you? That lousy production, I hope he dies!
Or you can make a harmless reference that provides insight into a character or their story. But again, it shouldn't be done carelessly.
This way, she can live her own life like Oprah wants her to.
But now I'm gonna make you eat those feelings like a teen doing the Tide Pod Challenge!
The tricky thing about using punching up as a criticism is that even when it might be appropriate, or at the very worst, harmless, feedback to its involvement is never consistent. Everyone is going to have different preferences and tolerances with regards to when and how punching up dialogue is acceptable during the adaptation process. When it comes to its use in anime ADR, some dubs have been praised for natural dialogue that has lots of flavor and personality.
I love the kind of woman that can kick my ass.
But it's likewise been criticized a lot for making things cringy, dated, or tonally inconsistent.
Makoto Tachibana, I've got backstroke for days!
Noob.com, let me clue you in here.
Well, aren't we Miss Self-Sufficient USA?
So context matters when looking at this stuff.
Hey girl, I see you.
Fight me, bitch.
Isn't this supposed to be one of those pumpkin spice health clubs for pretty people?
Let's get our swole on.
You're not starving, you're just hangry. Stop spitting up memes.
Nightmare sauce. I'd like to curl his dumbbell if you know what I mean.
We mentioned how slang and informalities can be a way to make dialogue sound less rehearsed.
Time to get my maid on!
Get your game on!
But I don't think it's hard to imagine how misusing that can end up having the complete opposite effect.
You sound so cool, like a gamer.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
For real? That is hilarious. Are you serious?
Yeah. What's he saying? Right? Magic words. You can get through most conversations using those phrases, so try to remember them.
For example, in Dragon Maid, I personally found moments like this cute in a way that doesn't betray the original intent.
There. 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 Here. How to tame your dragon.
Because the general meaning is still there, just worded in a way that makes the skit more memorable to me.
I've heard of this before. There's a should-be-forgettable movie that talks about it. About how humans only use approximately 10% of their brain capacity. Basically, if humans weren't so lazy, they would be able to have superpowers.
While lines like this can take me out of the moment because suddenly I'm being asked to remember something that feels odd for that character to reference. That's just how I felt though. Nowadays, quite a few Funimation dub writers tend to heavily punch up things in these fan-servicey comedies to varying degrees of success. There's nothing inherently wrong with trying to spice up dialogue, and again, everyone has different tastes. There are probably people out there who just love spice regardless. But in dubs like Dragon Maid, too much spice can overwhelm who these characters are, and sometimes the tone of the scenes that they're in. The dub doesn't completely invert any character personalities, but the dialogue at times misinterprets their archetypes. Jamie Marchi does play Lukoa with a light, laid-back attitude, but instead of an ara-ara character, some word choices lean her more towards that of an airheaded valley girl.
Everything chill?
Maybe they wanted to play into the gullibility of the mythological figure she's based on, but it does make her seem more conscious of social norms that she misunderstood in the original, not to mention how sexualized she is.
Let me direct. I can be nice and firm. Trouble can be such a beast, you know? I'm sorry, could you use words?
Baby! You can do it! Kick their tussies!
To me, the issue isn't purely about political jargon, because you can argue that some of her other uses of slang were inappropriate on a finer level, even though the patriarchy line is clearly inappropriate on a much more basic level. When it comes to the "but I'm not into women or dragons" line, Jamie said in those tweets that proactive language was appropriate for Kobayashi's characterization. Based on the subtitles and the seiyu's delivery though, I think Kobayashi is supposed to be a much less snarky, deadpan character.
あれは聞くのをやめといた方がいい気がする。やぶへびなのは間違いない。
She is very much the grounded straight man to everyone else's insanity, and that also makes these moments where she goes wild more humorous because of the apparent personality gap, which isn't as prominent in the dub. Leah Clark does sound exasperated and irritated, which isn't a total deviation from the character, and she has a good grasp of the show's comedic timing. She is also the one who uses the most modern-day colloquialisms and turns of phrase in the dub with more of a naturally sarcastic tone to her voice.
Your miso soup is killer today. So you shot based on dragon PTSD. Good to know. My point was less dragon rage and more don't drown. So dragons fall for online BS too.
Ooh, you're down to drink!
I'm not saying it doesn't work, and there are times where I found the performance very endearing.
So you mean she went home? Toru's gone.
I wouldn't even go so far as to say that Leah was miscast, but I'd be lying if I said her one-liners weren't done a bit too much. And it's at its worst in the first episode where there are so many to the point where it's borderline exhausting.
Hate to break it to you, but you don't know how to maid.
It's spit, not style!
You can't wear the same thing every day like you're in some anime. Yeah, it's my turn to take care of the special cousin.
There's almost no time to entertain the notion of some legitimately malicious intent because the "I'm not into women or dragons" line feels like the result of punching up the characters so much right out the gate while also overcorrecting the original line. Am I giving Jamie too much the benefit of the doubt? Maybe. You're more than welcome to criticize my reasoning because I don't think it's wrong to criticize hers. It's literally a dub staff's job to understand the material so thoroughly to the point where there isn't even room for these misunderstandings to occur. And if we don't criticize oversights like this, there's no guarantee things can get better. I've spent a lot of time talking about two specific moments in a dub for a 13-episode series, but that should speak to 1, how jarring those lines were, and 2, how much context needs to be brought up for the sake of breaking down the appropriateness of a creative choice. Moments like this are why I think a lot of people are dead set against the idea of punching up dialogue during the adaptation process, because there's a chance you might end up making a character say something that is in no way reflective of who they're supposed to be or what they're actually about. Ideally, as a viewer, you shouldn't need to wrestle with the thought process of what is appropriate for certain characters to say, or constantly question what type of character they're supposed to be in between scenes. While these two could be seen as the most egregious, there are also moments like these across the rest of the dub. For example, sometimes characters will introduce themselves in a way that doesn't quite match what their attitude is later on, like how Fafnir's introduction makes him sound more self-deprecating instead of openly hostile.
I hate this and everything it stands for. Kill me. I'm already dead inside.
Granted, it is quite hard to vocally capture some of these archetypes in English, but even when a line is technically saying the same thing as the original, certain wording can still generate that mixed response.
I'm not like a dragon racist or anything. I'm just not in the market right now to hire a maid.
It's cultural appropriation, but without any culture!
Then there are moments like this, which get followed up by this.
私に何をするつもりだったんだろう。したかった。
And in the dub, it went like this.
What was Kana gonna do to me earlier? Dragon style.
Now, this style of writing isn't exactly new to Jamie. It can be felt in some of her earlier dubs, some of which have thrived on adding bits of comedy that have pushed the envelope. I may not always agree with where Marky herself thinks it's appropriate, but when it does work, I'm honestly a big fan.
I've seen B-movies with better scripting than that.
However, dubs are by and large collaborative, and there are multiple points in the pipeline where a line could have been changed by someone else. Jamie's definitely responsible for some lines, but the performers could have easily gone off script and ad-libbed other lines in the booth. Some of the actors like Leah Clark and Jade Saxton have certainly done that before in other projects, and I guess the script supervisor could have also adjusted some lines. However, one of the last people in the sequence to look over these changes is the ADR director, which arguably also puts responsibility on them to catch other bad decisions the people before them have made. A lot can be said about the dub script for Prison School, for example, but in the commentary track, an actor did admit to ad-libbing a particularly weird line. Is that his bad for improvising, or the director's for going along with him? The ADR director for Dragon Maid is Kyle Phillips, and while he is currently one of Funimation's more well-known ADR directors, every now and then some of his shows can also have their own awkward moments.
Come at me, bro!
But instead of looking for someone to blame, it is worth noting that these moments of punched-up dialogue or added comedy don't dominate the whole show. Every episode of Dragon Maid is broken up into sections or skits. Some could last just a few minutes, while others take up almost half the episode, with the shorter segments being more relegated to the light-hearted slice-of-life moments. I think another reason why some jokes stand out so much is because they're mostly inserted during scenes that are already played for comedy, or more neutral scenes where you could argue it wouldn't be that jarring. If your goal was to make the show funnier, then this is a safe way to go about it. And dubs for comedy shows have more creative leeway to add humor since the main goal is to make the audience laugh. Though again, that's just more leeway, not infinite leeway. The comedy can be seen as unbalanced since some of those simpler slice-of-life moments are probably meant to be palate cleansers, not excuses for more comedy. However, maybe the staff assumed they had reason to spruce things up given what could already be found in the original. There are a couple of moments in the show that sound like they were punched up in the dub, but are actually almost the same as what can be found in the original. The one-liners definitely got to me the most in the first episode, and I think this is due to a common issue with the simuldub format, as you can't always gauge the trajectory of a character or story after just a few episodes, which might explain why the scripting calms down as the show goes on. Even though it has been taken a bit far at times, I do think Marky has shown investment with writing character-appropriate dialogue, like when it comes to Toru's curiosity when she first comes to the new world.
What is this?
I discovered some real-life maids while on my way here.
Use the internet to study up appropriate hygienic practices until I get home.
The what?
There are also flashback moments in Toru's mythological world where characters speak in Older English.
Human, out of what hole didst thou crawl?
It's not super apparent in the official subtitles, but it's a detail that makes that part of the story more immersive. There's literally an episode about the cast taking a well-known story and adding a bunch of unnecessary stuff to it for the sake of making it more interesting. Which would have been the perfect opportunity for the staff to be totally self-indulgent, but aside from this bit here...
Well, I don't think it translates that well, culturally speaking. Not to mention it's slow and repetitive and might bore the audience.
The whole thing is played pretty straight. And when it comes to those longer parts where the show slows down to have a genuine heartfelt moment between its characters, not only is there little to no excessive punched-up dialogue, but they also display some of the best writing and acting from the dub staff, even for the potentially romantic stuff despite never going back to re-record the incident in episode 1.
I try to control myself and put up with it. I work hard too. All I want is a lot of praise. And maybe to have you pet my head a little bit.
I have a tendency to put distance between me and other people. I've had friends before, but I've never let them get too close. So here. I know it might be different for dragons, but humans aren't that accepting of people who are different from them.
That's ludicrous.
Listen, Kana, I'm not asking for your trust or friendship. You can live here. That's all.
Okay. I'm so glad I fell in love with Miss Kobayashi.
But I think that's why the Dragon Maid dub feels so much harder to talk about compared to other controversial ones like Prison School and Hajimete no Gao. At the very least, with those shows they made it clear what kind of style they would go for right out the gate. Yeah, Dragon Maid also exhibits a lot of unnecessary or weird lines stuffed into moments where they aren't always warranted. However, in other parts, I do feel a real appreciation for the material, and it shows that this staff can display a level of tact above what other moments might imply.
Humans are either hits or misses. The misses make themselves known quickly, but it takes time to know if you found a hit. Spending that much time on every person would be too aggravating. I don't mind.
Huh?
You're a hit, Takia.
I am?
One of the main themes of Dragon Maid is that it's not always good to generalize a collective, because you might come across those one or two things that are exceptions to your expectations. So it's honestly a shame that this dub's legacy has kind of become the opposite. Not only is that not fair to the other people who had nothing to do with this dub, but it's also not fair to the staff whose larger body of work might tell a different story than whatever their mistakes here suggest. Even if you want to single out Jamie Markey, not all of her scripts are this divisive. The last full show she wrote for Funimation was Ancient Magus Bride, and while I wish that show displayed a bit more regional variety with its accents, the scripting was very well done. In the commentary track, she mentioned that she contacted the official manga translator to base her script around, but for some reason, her and several other people kind of stopped writing for Funimation sometime after that. But even her work on certain past shows like Spice and Wolf are excellent. According to Anime News Network, the most recent thing she wrote was episode 3 of Id Invaded, which is completely dry and conservative script-wise. Please understand that this video is not a condemnation of punching up dialogue on its own, as there will no doubt be dubs we talk about in the future where we will praise its use. Rather, Dragon Maid is an example of where this much of it may not have helped. I definitely think a lot of the complaints towards the dub for Dragon Maid are warranted, and I'm not even saying we should stop talking about it. This is probably a phase that the community needed to have at some point, whether it was with Dragon Maid or some other dub. The legacy could have been that people were able to accept that there are good parts of bad dubs and bad parts of good dubs with more nuance. The English dub fan community has a problem with hyper-defensiveness. However, we think that in part stems from a problem with hyper-dismissiveness from people outside our community, which has only gotten worse since this dub came out. I think even we've been affected by it too. The Cartoon Cipher isn't a perfect, unbiased entity. We're honestly just trying our best. But this environment of dubs can do no wrong versus dubs are fundamentally wrong provides almost no useful feedback for the people who actually make them. But that still doesn't give people in the industry an excuse to dismiss any good faith criticism. Because yeah, Dragon Maid definitely exhibits some of the problems of the industry that we're still kinda dealing with 15 seasons later. The consequences of taking too many liberties with writing, not taking time to sit with the material properly, etc. However, if we genuinely want to see the industry improve, a handful of lines from years ago can't be the only thing we keep talking about anymore. There's a lot more right and wrong with the dub of Dragon Maid. So to get to the heart of it, you need to go beyond the dragon titties.
Happy New Year.
And a Happy New Year to you as well.
For argument's sake, let's just say this is coffee. Thank you all so much to those who watched all the way to the end of the video, instead of just reading the title, writing a comment, and then leaving. With Season 2 of Dragon Maid coming out sometime next year, we honestly hope the dub will have better luck this time around. But if there's anything specific you guys would like to see improved upon that we didn't cover in this video, let us know in the comments down below. Speaking of this video, what are your thoughts on the whole idea of punching up dialogue in subs and dubs alike? Do you think I could have punched up this script a bit more to make it come off as less obnoxious? Let us know any genuine feedback you might have in the comments down below, and any updates or corrections can be found in the pinned comment as well as per usual. Huge thank you again to Mr. Nice Guy for editing this video. You really did a great job and knocked it out of the park. If you like what you see here and want to consider supporting us, then feel free to like and share the video around. Or you can become a donator at our Patreon. Shout out to the amazing people that are already donating to us and allowing to make all of these videos possible, including JR Pictures, Queen Era 2, Seth Phillips, Ahoba, Reagan Senpai, Masosa Gabby, Spartacus, Tristan Gallant, Unknown Secret 1000, and Xavier Gordon. This has been the Cartoon Cipher, and till next time.